Hi everyone, it's Connor and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new, welcome here. I am a chef, a yoga instructor, and a plant-based nutritional counselor. You might hear my little toddler chime in every now and again. She lives here, so and it's an impromptu snack time for her. So she will be joining us today. She may chime in on the topic here and there, and you know, she is entitled to her viewpoint, so maybe, you know, we'll get a little dialogue going. We'll see. Before we begin, I have 2 points. 1 point, check the description box down below to see if you would like to collaborate on some sessions with me. If you're local to the Cleveland area, you can have some personal chef services delivered right to your door, or we can collaborate to help with your wellness in some guided yoga, guided meditation, customized nutrition programs and ebooks, virtually sent to your email, however you want to flow with this. So make sure you check out my socials and my contact information, and let's see if we can collaborate. Second thing, the topic we're going to talk about today, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, it's about Black health within America. And whose fault is it anyway that Black people are seemingly incredibly unhealthy? This is my second point, is I will be touching upon the Black experience within the United States. If that does not apply to you, even if you're in the United States and throughout this video you find that you're not experiencing anything that I'm discussing, keep that in mind and be constructive about your comments down in the comment section. If this is not your experience, that's completely fine, but that doesn't entitle you to downgrade somebody else's life or anything that they have come in contact with because you yourself have not experienced what they have experienced. Thank you. So to begin, by and large, we know that abuse and oppression and systematic injustices have been a mainstay encounter within the Black community within the United States of America. Now, this country being built on the backs of slaves is nothing new to most of us. It's not new information. However, there is acquired trauma from this action, and it's actually still affecting the descendants of those slaves of our lives to this very day. So basically, what's expected to be well and healthy is not necessarily Black, because the perception of us has been chattel, has been labor, has been strength, people who don't feel pain in a sense. Strength not in like a good way, resilience not in a good way, not something that's inspiring, you know, something to be built up to, something to look to. It's actually something where you can just like abuse that and build wealth off of it for yourself and not for, you know, me, the person who looks like me. So this comes all the way down to food sources. Food sources that are generally connected to African culture are on a regular basis unjustifiably considered as unhealthy, laden with salt and sugar and fat. And we're going to touch upon that during this video about why that is. Now, there are many fast food versions that are distant cousins of dishes and delicacies that were eaten all throughout the agricultural South, the old agricultural South. The cooking was incredibly inventive because it had to be. It wasn't necessarily something that was warranted out of desire. It was we gotta swallow whatever these people give us because we need to survive, right? It's survival food. So when we think of innovation, we think of cooking greens with ends of meat to provide a certain amount of protein for someone, or slow cooking less desirable cuts since that was only available. And this is in slow cooking, this is where we look at braising, this is where we look at boiling and smoking, ultimately where barbecuing, low and slow, comes from. It's absolutely no mistake that our areas currently, and it's not confined into just Black urban areas, it's also Black rural areas and suburban areas. It's no mistake that these areas are overwhelmed with the quick and mishandled renditions of dishes that actually served us at one point. I made a video quite a while back about a presentation that I had given about the traditional Southern foods that were eaten that did not cause disease in slaves because of the amount of labor that was exerted. So the heavy amounts of fat and salt and sugar that was in the food had no chance to actually like erode the body and cause disease because there's 18 plus hours of backbreaking labor and chronic stress that's breaking down that food. So when we talk about that there's no mistake that we have all of these mishandled renditions of Southern fare, why would that be? Because racism feeds injustice. What does that look like? You know, you say something like that. What does that look like, Connor? It looks like a lack of access to jobs, to education, to safe housing, to personal safety. These factors are fundamental determinants of health and well-being across this nation. You know, what school do you go to? What food do you eat on an everyday basis? The nation over, Black people are lopsidedly underfunded in all of these key areas. Bigotry influences nourishment. Are you okay? Okay. Bigotry influences nourishment as a social determinant of well-being, and that affects Black individuals' access to good food when it all boils down to it. Now, there are major primary and fundamental imbalances which are overwhelmingly devastating to us as a people within this country. And we're gonna talk about 3 pillars for a hot second. Number 1 is lack of access. So Black people, as I touched upon before, in both rural and metropolitan areas are bound to encounter some sort of food instability. Markets are crazily redlined, and the act of redlining, you might have heard of this before, but it is the act of barring whole geographical regions from getting resources, and this results in a decrease of access to full service grocery stores. We then turn around and Black people are now in communities that have excessive offerings of dollar stores and liquor stores that provide nutrient poor, yet calorie dense, inexpensive, shelf-stable products. And when I'm talking about shelf-stable, I don't mean like potatoes or rice or cabbage or foods that have like literally one ingredient that can stay without refrigeration for a certain amount of time. No, I'm talking about Takis, I'm talking about Mountain Dew, I'm talking about honey buns, I'm talking about, you know, those things. We have access to that. And once you have a community full of those types of offerings, you are now creating a food swamp and a food desert. And we'll talk about those definitions in a little bit. Access to basic essential needs varies widely. It's greatly dependent on environmental factors, including, as touched upon earlier, employment, housing, education. And it can also roll into healthcare practices and policies that's available to you in your local area. These issues, compounded with the decreased availability and the lower intake of nutrient-dense foods, just creates the perfect storm of an increase in risk of non-communicable diseases. Things such as chronic heart disease, high blood pressure, also known as hypertension, kidney failure, and diabetes. The second pillar we're looking into is monetary boundaries. So without financial means to consistently purchase these nutritious items or to actually access other modalities of health, because it's not just nutritious food, it's also things about different modalities of exercise. Do you live in a place, we talked about personal safety, do you live in a place where you feel safe to let your kids run around outside? Or for you to take a walk or a run outside? Do you, like where I live, we have a yard. We live in a pretty safe neighborhood, and we also live near a metro park, which is actually like a trail. You know, you can go and hike. There's a waterfall. There's a slow like creek going through. There's different types of ecosystems around where we live. That sort of place. Do you have that sort of place to be able to be in. Food choices then are driven by availability, and more often than not, this means that they're rich in added sugars, added salts, added fats, synthetic fats, you know, to add on to that. And historically, Black families haven't had the access to the same financial stability as their counterparts. I don't care what anyone else says to you. There's this whole discussion now that Black people have had the same access that other people have had this whole time, because a select few of Black people have done it. Skip, pass me with it, pass me all the way with that. I really don't care. If there's a gap, there's a gap, sorry. Third pillar that we're gonna touch upon is training. Many schools within the Black community are incredibly underfunded. So what does this mean? This means that we are leaving children who attend these schools with an impacted quality of school lunches, some of them school breakfasts. So you're eating 2 meals out of your day at this institution that is not funded enough to feed you healthfully. And also, you don't have the supportive educational curriculum to learn about nutrition and health, which I guess also helps. Like, if you're feeding kids crap, would you want them to learn about crap food? Because then maybe they wouldn't want to eat when they get to school, because it's like, well, this is crap, I don't want to eat this, you know. So I guess that's the psychology behind it. I'm not sure. Okay, Connor, so you have presented us with these 3 pillars of problems. You better have some solutions. I'm glad you said something, because I have a few outlined here today. The quality of life within Black communities has been adversely impacted as a result of centuries of, let's call it hate. Hate and indifference, okay? Which, worse than hate, honestly, indifference. I know you guys have heard the famous Martin Luther King quote about, you know, indifference. If you haven't, Google it and just go from there. Now, I have my personal opinion and my personal preference of how I would like to see these solutions be built up, and it's mainly along the lines of the Black Panther Party in just doing it ourselves for ourselves. But I understand that there is also another mindset where it has to be on a larger scale than that. Like, more people than just the Black community have to be involved, and I see the logic within that. I really do. So that's what we're going to talk about. By and large, that's what we're going to talk about today. Structures need to be dismantled and rebuilt with equity at the forefront. Equity and diversity. Funds also need to be redistributed to support the most marginalized of our communities. Humane, quality healthcare needs to be provided to unburdened communities that bear the brunt of these metabolic diseases. So if you have an entire community that's just, say, statistically, the United States, almost 50% of us are overweight. So you go into those communities that make up that 50% and you offer them the health care that relieves them of that disease, and then you offer them other things that help them to change their lifestyle to keep up with that relief of that disease. That's where you start building. You heal, and then you keep going. Once you heal one generation of sick people, then the other generations, you know how to create preventive care. That's the kind of mindset that we're coming with in this solution. I know, isn't that amazing? There are certain people who are in positions of power who just need to ask themselves how they can actively contribute to this cause, you know, to contribute to systemic change while dismantling bigotry and racist practices. I almost forgot the word racist. Hi. What's the matter? Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Here you go. There are actionable and measurable steps that can be implemented to bridge the gaps that we're all experiencing here? Oh, but I mean the Black community. Overall synopsis of solutions, and we're gonna break this down a little bit. Yes. Okay, so we're gonna break this down a little bit. Nutrition education. I love teaching, and I love teaching about food. I love teaching about things that are nourishing and that things that are healthy, and just I love it. So there needs to be, on the local level, area-based drives that meet the individuals in those local communities where they are at, so that significant information is connected together, the well-being of the people in that community and what's going to come into that community. These solid local area connections support long-term change. It's not just, let's put a Whole Foods in the hood and then we're done. No, it can get incredibly intricate. That's what it has to. It's not that it can, but it should. It should be that intricate to go into a specific community, ask them what they're having trouble with, ask them what they would like to see, and then put 2 and 2 together. See, one, is it plausible? You know, what they want versus what they need, you know, and go from there. The shutting down of food swamps and food deserts, it's vital to be aware of the ways of which we're talking about this topic, and then also that translating into action. We don't want to be here consistently talking about how change needs to happen, change needs to happen, change needs to happen, and this is how it needs to happen. No, we need to go from there and then actually do something about it. I'm here doing this video, and then like a week from now, I'm doing a workshop of nutritious eating with kids. I'm out here doing the work. I give cooking classes. I've given presentations for years. I've gone to different churches, different synagogues, different temples, all of the places to give presentations about healthful food options. You have to talk about it and then take action with it. So especially when we're talking about expanding choices and access to food, it ought to be done, like I said before, with a local focus methodology. Are working with local areas to implement change that are long-term changes that can be carried out from generation to generation, right? So for instance, you go into a community and you say, well, you think they would want a grocery store, but you go to this meeting with them and you ask them what they want, and they said, well, for us and our access to fresh produce, we don't want a grocery store. We want to have a farmer's market. We want an all-year farmer's market. So, and how can we make that happen? And we also want, because this is a Black community, and because this is the Black community, we also would like that farmer's market to be Black-led. Are there any Black farmers in this area that need support? They need support as farmers, and we need support in the way of fruits and vegetables. And then also, what's the economic forecast of this community? Are there a lot of people who utilize SNAP, EBT, WIC? Can you get that farmer's market to accept all 3, or at least 2 out of the 3, ideally all 3 of these systems of assistance? Because there are farmers markets that do. A lot of people don't know that. I actually did a video about how to use WIC coupons at the farmers market and what you can get with it and how that whole process works. I'll leave that linked in the description box down below. So you have to have a discourse. A discourse approach empowers people. It empowers through independence and through office and through self-supporting energy. So what else is there to do? Biases are inevitable. You know, we all have them. I have them. I'm sure Miss Toddler has them. We're just, you know, we're born that way. We're humans. All beliefs and behaviors are inherently learned. And whether they're taught through family, friends, education, workplace, other institutions, religious, things like that, political affiliations, social environments, all that jazz. Yes. Yes, ma'am. So society reinforces and perpetuates are biases in one way, shape, or form, right? So intentionality is of the most importance for all of us to do. That's what else we can do, is to have intentionality to acknowledge, address, and unlearn those biases that we have. And this can lead to our changed beliefs and changed behaviors ultimately. And that's what previously I mentioned what my personal viewpoint is on how to build Black health back up. And I really think it depends on us as a community, and not necessarily being worried about what non-Black people can do to help us, for us, with us, you know, what have you. But also, I know there are some non-Black people out there who are curious and who would like to do better, you know, improve upon themselves. I give you this opportunity. In the description box down below, I will list some anti-racist trainings that you can find online. There are a number of them out there and other resources available that are specifically focused on implicit biases, racism, race, bigotry, and social determinants of health. There you go. But there is one measure that I do offer to non-Black people and Black people alike that you can do. Quit blaming Black people. Just stop it. Stop it altogether, okay? Collectively, we all need to stop blaming Black communities for their health risks. I'm telling them. I know. It's incredibly unfair, isn't it? I know it is. That's why we're telling the people. That's what we're telling the people right now, that it's incredibly unfair to blame Black people. We also all need to understand that social determinants of health largely influences nutrition within everyone's community. So also, you know, breaking down that bias of what is someone's cultural food and why that's healthy and why that's not healthy is something that is the something that needs to be broken down. If you've all seen that, I think it's a TikTok. I saw it on Facebook, but I think it started out as a TikTok where some woman pointed out how many calories was in a certain amount of fried plantains, and another woman is like, why would you do that? Who? You just wanted to ruin someone's life. Great. Now what? You know? That sort of thing. Don't nitpick. Plantain is a wonderful food, healthy, nutritious, whole food, something that has kept a whole culture of people going for generations. All of a sudden now we're stamping a calorie count to it for what? For what? And because it's fried, you know, and there wasn't a solution behind it. There wasn't a, oh, try this air fried version, or oh, try baked plantain, which, I don't know, eat the fried plantain, right? This is the kind of bias that we need to break down, perhaps even changing how we see determinants of health within different cultures and adopting that in America, since so many cultures are within our melting pot here. Another thing that I'm gonna list down in the description box is Black-led groups that are also Black servicing that I love to champion and support whenever I can. These organizations that are all focused on improving nutrition and healthful well-being, positive outcomes within the Black community when it comes to access of food and any other health modalities. It's really important for people to find these groups that align with their own interests and beliefs, because then it makes it more easy for you to support said groups. So I'm gonna list a few down in the description box. So click on those, check out those. They'll also lead you to other groups that you may find. You can do a lovely Google search and find something and go from there. You can also use your social media for good. You're not just scrolling, looking at fashion or looking at pranks or looking at dances, things like that, even though those are fine. But also broaden your scroll time. seeking leaders that resonate with you, who are about helping with the health and well-being of Black communities. So I'll list some. I'm sure you've heard of these. I'll list about 4 down in the description box. I'm sure you've heard of them. Some of them are authors. Some of them have, you know, nonfiction books. Some of them have cookbooks. So just check it out. Maybe you can look at this and find some affirmations that resonate with you that can help the Black community as well. Maybe you'll find some recipes that are really, really good, and you'll see the history behind it and how it served the Black community, or how it serves it now, what that dish looks like now. Are you okay? The overarching issue here is dismantling racism systemically, right? So the inequalities, the racist practices, the amount of barriers that are maintained to persist and widen the gap for the Black community, the gap of health, the gap of well-being, the gap of precious good food, you know, the generational impact of lacking access to affordable, nutritious foods. Might I add, safe foods. There are many communities that get foods that have been on national recall lists, and they have no idea they've been on that list. I know, it's wild, isn't it? A close discourse, close collaboration between government agencies, and that can go from local all the way to how far you want to take it, right? And the communities that we live in, our community leaders. I would love to see elders, you know, more involved, less stuck in their ways of eating, you know, Vienna sausage and ambrosia on a daily basis, and more into what did they eat in their youth, and what did their grandparents eat and serve and make, and finding those stories and creating that narrative back for ourselves to live off of. And also, like, young parents, I use myself as an example. Young parents looking to find the best ways to fuel their children to have the best lives that they can thrive in, you know, that sort of thing. And there also has to be community willingness to restructure the current system. So if you live in a community who does not care, which for some of us, that may be the case, I am very sorry to you, and I would say just keep pushing. Do the best that you can do for you, but keep pushing the narrative. Keep finding that information. Keep finding the studies and the literature and the resources. Keep finding all of this stuff and sharing it. The movies, the documentaries, the songs. There are tons of things that can speak to to any and everyone. So just find those. And you just have to have the willingness to restructure our current system for widespread, what I like to call, revolution of food and health and wellness. It's also an evolution. We're trying to elevate ourselves. No thank you. No thank you. Chai. No. What are you eating? Give me that. Outside of my personal beliefs, I also understand that for widespread elevation, for widespread revolution of our own health and wellness, dismantling systemic injustices and inequalities such as racism, within bigotry, and those structural inequalities that couple with those, they must remain a priority and to be elevated to a national agenda. And this is only because that's the way that you can get public awareness, education, and support about it, right? You have to make it a big deal so that people care. In closing, don't forget to check out the description box down below, as I have mentioned a few times within this video, to check out a wealth of resources for you, your family, and your friends. Chai. No, thank you. If you would like to collaborate together on your own health and wellness journey, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Including also feeding plant-based kids. I have 2 toddlers who are vegans and they're absolutely thriving. If you got anything out of this, please share with your circle. Please like, please subscribe, and start a dialogue down in the comments. Remember the disclaimer at the beginning of this video about keeping your comments constructive, especially if none of this is part of your own experience. And this channel is about expanding the ego, which is you and I as individuals, and everything else in between that surrounds us, and reducing the ego, which is you and I as individuals, just focusing on us. We have to have a nice balance of what affects us, what we do for ourselves can also affect and do for others outside of ourselves. All right? Love and light, guys.